we just started some kind of crazy construction or something like that.
Isn't it kind of late over there?
No, it's yeah, somewhat. Yeah, 6 p.m. thereabout.
What time? What's the how late are they allowed to do construction before it's against regulations or whatever?
Well, first of all, in Africa, it's free for all. I don't know if you can see me. It's like my camera isn't on. So let me see if I can fix that.
You
Yes.
don't have to if you don't want to.
No, it's fine. Yeah. So how do you like my new setup? Um,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, I got a new monitor, 32-inch 4K monitor. So yeah, I can see everything now.
And I've been using a laptop for like the past like 5 years. I could appreciate monitors,
Hmm.
but I don't know. I would expect to have monitors, dual monitors, if I were like required to commute to work. But
Okay.
it's just not that serious for me at home.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So concerning the construction, like it's to be honest, it's free for all. However, typically by 6 o'clock, they're about 6:30. All construction should stop. So I don't know how long they will do this for, but yeah. Sorry about that.
No, we're
So
good.
how's it been? Yeah.
I'm all right. I almost every single day I think about buying a flight and going back home, and
Yeah.
I just miss being physically active, man. I miss not asking permission to just leave the house and hang out downtown. Like I miss just being independent, hopping on my motorcycle and just being
Mm,
free. And up here, I just don't have any transportation, and I'm out in the burbs. So
mm.
it's 3 months in, it's taking its toll on me.
Yeah, like I can imagine. So, but like in terms of travel, I know people in the US are traveling, but it's like you can't do international travel just yet, just domestic.
Um, I can go back to the United States. I think there's just a little
Mm.
bit of a ceremony trying to get back into Canada, and I have some obligations up here.
Ah,
So,
okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I
uh,
can imagine. Yeah.
so you
So how did you see the F sharp conf?
I I only caught your talk for like the first I think 10 minutes,
Mhm.
and I would periodically check up on other talks, but I've never consumed like an entire session of anything. There was there wasn't anything that really jumped out at me that I'm like a student of right now.
Ah, I see.
So like
Yeah,
if it were
because
like 3 or 4 years ago, then I would be all over domain modeling. If it was 5 years ago, I would be all over just every F sharp talk ever.
mm,
Right now, I feel like I'm kind of in a comfortable position. I don't know if that's good or bad, where like there's nothing that really piques my interest where I think I'm really going to learn a like or perform a paradigm shift. Like I'm not at that right now.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I kind of, I guess where you're coming from. Like, a few years ago, I made the decision to just pick a tribe. According to Scott Hanselman, he said you have to pick a tribe of technologies. That there isn't anything as a good or bad technology necessarily. It's how well does it fit with the rest of your workflow and ecosystem and all that. So certain people have decided that the JavaScript is their tribe, right? And essentially they focus on things like Node.js, um, Cordova, and all this kind of stuff. I just decided I'm just going to pick .NET as my tribe. So that doesn't mean I don't like try out other technologies. That doesn't mean I don't do like Android and Java and Kotlin and all that. But like if it comes to my core competence, I'm just sticking with .NET and F Sharp for now. So yeah, and it pays off in a way because you know almost every technology is deep. When you say deep, like you can get lost in virtually even C sharp. Um, but by picking a tribe, it allows you to essentially focus and really um, really dive deep into that technology. So, like for example, my
When
talk
you
on
say
type
tribe,
providers, right?
are you is that a synonym
Yeah.
for stack?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. It's a synonym for a stack, but a stack is kind of very limited in scope. A tribe, so an example of a tribe would be um, the Java and Elk stack. You know the Elk stack, Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana, right? Okay, so back in Java land, in Java tribe, right, they have this set of technologies that they use to store um, what's the word now? They use it to store um, like non-relational data. So it's like a NoSQL data store in a way. That's Elasticsearch, and it has very good performance um, in terms of query finding things, right? But it isn't so good in terms of inserts and deletes and all that. So Elasticsearch was written on a Java tool called a Lucene or something like that. And there's nothing that stops any other person from using Elasticsearch, right? Elasticsearch works perfectly well with .NET, with Node.js and all that, but it's something that is part of the Java tribe. So they have better support, they have more plugins, they have, there are more users who are using Elasticsearch and Java together, right? So that's what I mean by tribe, a bunch of technologies that all work together in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, so yeah, sticking with one tribe, picking technologies that work well together that that you have good support for, people have used it successfully in production, and people are now starting to build, what's the word, meta patterns. People are starting to build, ways of doing things, new cultures on top of those technologies. So, yeah, yeah, I think the interplay between culture and should I say stack is what you call a tribe. Does that make sense?
Yeah. If I take a step back,
Yeah.
I just need one or two products to take care of me for the next 8 years, and
Mm.
I won't care about this stuff anymore. Like
Really?
I literally just need some products that generate revenue streams, and I
Mm.
don't have to have these conversations with other programmers about things that annoy me and things to be aware of. Like, I feel like I'm getting to the point where like my attention span for tech, based on what type of tech is being introduced, it's
Mm.
there's only two paradigms right now, and so I feel like I'm just going to hang up and just focus on product development until there's a
Mm.
true paradigm shift that I could get excited over. And Maui's not
Mm.
one of them. So that's it.
Yeah, I think I share the same. I share the same feeling as well. In my own case, what I'm doing now is I'm not as voracious as I used to be in terms of following and studying technology. But like I said, picking a tribe is the first part of it. And the second part is that anytime I see a new technology, like you said, there are very few paradigm shifts really. And anytime a new technology comes on board, I try to put on a CTO hat, right? So the role of a CTO is just to analyze and um, evaluate technology without necessarily going into the details of it, right? So just looking at a technology, understanding the science behind the computer science behind that technology, and figuring out how can I use this technology to like create a better product, or how can I use this technology to say save money or deploy applications faster, you know? So that's the mood I'm in now. And only when I see a fundamental change in the way, like a fundamental rift, like something that really, sets itself apart, it's only then do I now invest the time, maybe watch a video series on it, and after that, invest even more time, get a book on it, and really study it. So for me, I still have some fuel going on. In terms of Kubernetes, I think a while ago I was already like tapped out in terms of backend development, software development and all that. But Docker containers, Kubernetes for me is one of those technologies that on the very high level, right? I looked at it and I was like, yeah, this is a game changer, And that's when I started investing time and energy into learning it. But other than that, yeah, you're right. For example, recently I tried to learn Python and Django and all of that. And Python is a cool language, but like you said, it doesn't bring anything to the table that you don't get with something like F sharp, right? And I already know F sharp. So I just didn't see any need for it, right? I didn't see any need to like go in depth. So I kind of just learned it on the surface and just left it. And there are a few other technologies like that where I didn't just bother spending the hours and trying to build something with it. I just analyze it on a very high surface level. And it's only when I see that something is going to be a game changer do I now zoom in and I'll try to really learn that technology. So I think if you ask me, I would say you should do the same as well. So don't just give up altogether, because believe it or not, even if tomorrow you had two products that were like killer apps and all that, right? You have to maintain those things. Candy Crush was a killer app of say 5, 10 years ago, but there are still engineers working on Candy Crush every single day, right? They're still coming up with new innovations because we are in an ever evolving industry, and if you don't evolve, you just be left behind. So
Yeah, well,
yeah, even if you did, yeah.
what's the definition of evolve? Because to me, like, okay, like 3 days ago, I posted 7 things that I would tell the old me of 10 years ago, and one of which was remember that software development is a means to an end. The means is to learn how to build automated solutions and to generate revenue or profit so that you can use those resources for investing in other things, right? So basically for building automated streams of income.
Mm,
And that's I mean, for me, that's the objective. The objective isn't learn F sharp to show, everybody how elite I am. The objective is
mm,
how can I take what I know, refine it so that I can do it faster and with higher quality and less maintenance than 90% of other
mm,
folks, and then make my money as a result of me being able to industrialize whatever uh, things that people need automated, and then take that money and just
mm,
invest, whether it's real estate, uh, a stock market that actually is logical and makes sense. I've done it
mm,
before, not the real estate part, but I was very well off 5 years ago, and so I know it's attainable.
mm,
And 5 years ago, I didn't care that much about software development. It got me to where I needed to be in a position to start making like boss moves, right? But
mm,
that's it.
mm. Yeah, yeah. What you said made sense, and it's perfectly valid. In fact, when I started like working in a company, right? I used to be on the opposite end of your argument, which was that for me, software was the end in itself. In other words, getting better, building better technologies, improving your technology stack, improving your skills, and all that. That used to be um, my position, right? And I used to push back on the corporate types in my office who used to tell me, no, it's all about making software a means to an end, right? And it wasn't until I was put in charge of different projects, right? I was asked to ship products, and I was asked questions like, how much have we made from XYZ product that you shipped last week or last month? That my mindset started to shift a little bit. That yes, you're right. You want you want products that can actually bring in revenue. If a software is not deployed, and somehow I think the real answer is somewhere in the middle, right? No matter how good a software you build is, if the software doesn't bring in revenue, it's useless, it's pointless, even if you use Haskell to write it. But at the same time, it's also kind of, the software is only going to bring in revenue if people are using the software, people get value from the software. And then people wouldn't get value from the software if it is poorly written. You see how it all interconnects, right? So I would say the answer is a little bit in the middle, right? You don't want to just do software development for software development's sake, or do coding because you want to show everyone that you understand all the principles of functional programming or something like that. Like, to me, that's kind of pointless. At the same time, you know, the value of the software comes from the ability to ship new features quickly to users, the ability to write software that isn't buggy, that is stable, that is high performance, and all those kind of stuff. So it's one of those things where it makes sense to not just pursue the dollar signs, right? Because you just want to just deploy something that's bringing in money. At the same time, you have to also think of, how do I build this in such a way that users would gain, users would get value from it, because it's that value that attracts money. You understand? So Google, for example, Google, Facebook, Amazon, those companies don't pay their developers huge, humongous salaries for nothing, right? They pay those developers those amounts of money because they know that by spending more into the engineering of their products, right, that translates into dollars in the long run. So yes, the art and science of software engineering is very important, but it is only important in as much as it gets you to the goal, which is value, producing value. It's one of the reasons I like F Sharp a lot, really, because compared to the elites in the Haskell community or even the Clojure community, for example, you have F Sharp is very pragmatic, and it's very direct and straight to the point. In fact, F Sharp shares a lot of philosophies with Python, even more than the parent OCaml as well. So things like, so for example, the version of F Sharp we write today isn't how F Sharp was in the beginning. Are you aware of that?
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Hmm.
Yeah, that there used to be this OCaml syntax that was just heavy, and you'd have to use end everywhere and all those kind of stuff. And Don Simon Co, the developers of F Sharp had to sit down and say, how can we cut all this crap and just go straight to the point? Even something like type providers, as an example, is one of those things where it cuts all the crap. How can we go straight to the point? So imagine if I just wanted to write a simple application and just move data from one database to the other. Type providers is the shit, because all I just need to do is write a script, connect to database A, move the copies to database B. The users don't care that I use the script to do it. The users don't even care that whether I wrote a full-fledged application program that has multiple layers of domains and all of those kind of stuff. All they care is that this thing works, it's stable, and it does what it wants it to do. So yeah, my position currently is a little bit in the middle. I'm not towards the ends justifies the means, and I'm not also the means is in the software engineering itself. I don't know if I'm making any sense. I see that it's a balancing act. You have to balance the two and strike that line in the middle, which isn't easy. You know?
I guess we just look at things differently. Don't get me wrong. It
Yeah.
it's execution that gets you to uh, your your objective, right, or your
Mm-hmm.
accomplishment. And so technology is a major part of execution. Like you can't automate something with sticks and stones, right? And so
True, true.
tech is important. What I'm saying is, what really is my purpose in life? Is my purpose in life to be the greatest? Here's the goal that I set. And I think I lived up to it
Mm,
in my reality. I don't care about other people's reality. Is I'm the technical
mhm,
authority in F sharp in the state of Florida. That's something that I set out for about 4 years ago, and I believe I am the technical authority in the state of Florida. Right. The thing is okay. Now what? I fed my ego. I demonstrated that I am it.
mm,
But
mm,
how does that help my purpose? It doesn't. I still live in apartments, right? I don't have an estate, right? I don't have a horse ranch in my backyard. Like, what?
mm,
Why am I really doing this? Am I doing this just to try to compete, or am I doing this
mm,
because I want to leave a legacy and I want to make
mm,
things better? And I just feel like money talks more than tech does. And to really increase my worth, it's the economy or the industry rewarding me for significantly impacting them or improving them. And I'm kind of
mm.
scatterbrained right now, but
I think I get you. I think I completely get you. Like,
okay.
for example, I could say I'm the technical authority in F-sharp in the whole Nigeria, but it's like, yeah, it's true. But the question is like, what value does that have? Really, you're right. It doesn't really have any value. Yeah, it really doesn't. But I remember something that Richard Campbell said one time that just kind of stuck with me, where he pointed to a house, or he was saying something, and he was like, he was telling someone, that house that the house I have in so place, either in Florida or wherever the case may be. IIS bought me that house. Like, when he said that, I was like, whoa! Like, my brain just exploded. Like, he was such an expert at IS that companies were asking him, "Oh, we need you to help us solve X during the dot-com boom, during the Y2K era and all of that." So it's like he made so much money from his knowledge of IIS that he was able to build a freaking house with it. And he can point to, yeah, my knowledge of IIS, this is what it helped me achieve. So I think, yes, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. It's like, the fact that you know so much F sharp, what value does it really bring? Other than the fact that you can point to one or two applications, you can point to one or two things that, okay, this is what I've built with it. And I feel, to some extent, I feel like that's the real problem that the F sharp community has. Is that we are more, even though the language itself is very pragmatic, there are very few people, very few companies who have built stuff on it, who can show that, look, this is what we were able to achieve. Maybe with the exception of jet.com, right? There aren't that many companies which are just solely F sharp shops. Um, Now, the company I work for, like Advice Connect, we use F Sharp exclusively, and we have a product to show that, look, this is what you can use F Sharp for. And yeah, it's been very rewarding for me, being able to use F Sharp for to essentially earn a living and all that. But I see what you're saying. Like, we need to have. I know I'm rambling a lot, but we need to have like products that we built using the technologies we already know. Because the technologies we already know are good enough to handle virtually any type of application or system that we want to build, you know?
I think I get what you're saying.
Mm,
In order for F sharp to be a a cartel like component, um, or something that's really significant in the industry, it needs to be
Mhm.
something that software development ecosystem, it needs to be an influencer, right? So what I mean by influencer is it needs to be
Yes.
it really needs to be a platform. So what really is the definition of a platform? Well, if you ask me, a platform is a mechanism that already has use cases that you could plug in additional functionality onto. So, for
Okay.
example, there's certain guns that are platforms that you can. I don't know if you play Call of Duty, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That.
there's certain classes of the AR, like there's AR-15s, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But AR is a platform where you could change the scope, you could change the type of clip, the what type of munitions in that clip, banana clip. You
Mm-hmm.
can have the adjustments to your recoil. You can have light beams on it. It is a platform.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
software,
Mm-hmm.
right, that has significant influence, what platforms exist? Well, the platform would be, well, one, Linux, right? But the first one I think about
Yeah.
is WordPress. That is a platform. People program to
Yeah.
WordPress, right? They program to it.
Yeah. People have job titles. WordPress developer.
Yeah.
So
And so like
yeah.
based on what you said, if F sharp is really going to obtain a foothold, and yes, are there counter examples like Python? Like, is there a platform for Python? Probably not, but I'm pretty sure that
Um.
there's some libraries that are must have for machine learning that Python is just recognized for. I'm not so sure that F
Yes.
sharp has libraries that is go to for specific areas of computing like Python is.
I I think no. So I study programming languages a lot, right? And it's funny you mentioned Python because Python wasn't always the de facto for machine learning, right? The de facto before Python was R and MATLAB, right? But those two weren't really developer friendly. So what the Python people did, and this is what I think F sharp is missing, was that there were a lot of shops, there were a lot of companies who wanted to go, like Google, for example, who wanted to do machine learning and didn't want to be using R. So they took the pains and re-implemented most of the libraries, the Python libraries. We implemented them most of the R libraries. We implemented them in Python. So because of that, a lot of and they were using it, and that's part of the motivation behind porting it was because they were using it internally. Google, in particular, most of the success of Python is due to the fact that the creator used to work at Google. So Google was a very strong proponent of Python. In fact, I think in general, like when it comes to languages, right? Google is actually better at pushing languages than Microsoft. I'm sorry to say, it's just what it is. Take, for example, the language called Dart. It came out a very long time ago. It was a dead platform. When I say dead, I mean it was deader than which platform is so dead? Perl, right? Because it was supposed to replace JavaScript in an era where nobody wanted to rewrite browsers. So it died. Let's just say Dart died. Only for recently, Google figured out how to resurrect the language. So what they did was they built a platform, not really a platform, a framework really for developing mobile apps, and that's Flutter. And before you know what's happening, it took the world by storm, and now everybody's learning that
Flutter? I don't think Flutter.
something that nobody
I,
really
I,
Flutter.
I,
Forget, I'm serious.
React, yes, but Flutter,
Trust me. There is so React Native has a lot of momentum behind it, but trust me, the rate at which the Flutter community is growing is incredible. I kid you not. Like I know entire shops who left Xamarin to do Flutter. I know entire
yeah,
I know
and you
people
want
who
to know
even left
why?
React Native.
You want to know why?
Yeah, because yeah, I know why Xamarin is a lot.
Well, no, I was in the
Okay,
shop.
why?
I was a
Okay.
mobile architect for United States Postal Service, in which
Mm.
they decided that they didn't want anything to do with Microsoft. That's
Huh.
why. That's why.
Interesting.
But the
Wow.
my I was hired as a mobile architect because I knew Xamarin.
Mm.
But at one meeting, some person that decides what technologies are going to be used for their agency decided that the only options that we were to use, not that I doubt that person even had any experience programming anything, was Flutter or React, and that's it. That's it.
Hmm.
And that was the next day I lost my job. Right, even though I was hired on
Wow.
because of Xamarin specifically, they were looking for a Xamarin architect, and then they didn't realize that Xamarin would be an issue for that particular government agency. So that's one example is the client. And if the client has a whitelist of approved stacks or tribes, then yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean I could speak from
Yeah,
firsthand experience.
that's crazy.
Xamarin is cool, man.
That's
It's
crazy.
just there's not a lot of government agencies that well, I won't say that. I will say that there's some government agencies that just have crazy sick processes and whitelists. Not
Yeah.
blacklists, but
Yeah.
whitelists on what you can use, and they're just
Whitelist.
they're very very controlled. And if they don't like somebody from a certain vendor or they had a bad experience at some time, then that's it, man. It's very political,
Wow.
I think, because it has
That's
nothing to do with
crazy.
security. It doesn't. It doesn't.
Mm.
It has, yeah. Oh,
But at the
you
same
can tell I'm
but
so
at the,
frustrated from that. What are you saying?
yeah, yeah, I can tell. It's crazy. It's crazy. No, like I was saying that, but in fairness, there are also the reverse is also true too. Like you get to some certain shops that would say we are just Microsoft only and we don't use anything other than Microsoft technology, So yeah, it happens both ways too. But I feel your pain. Like that doesn't make any sense. It wasn't like there was some kind of analysis, or it wasn't like someone sat down and was like, okay, let's look at the pros and cons of just we don't use Microsoft anymore, and that's the end. Doesn't make any sense.
Here's another example of platform, and here's another example of a dead language. And I'll give you a hint. Two, 2007 or 2008. Do you know what happened in that year?
Silverlight.
You're close.
Silverlight.
You're close, but no. We're in regards to platform. You're very
Oh,
close,
really?
but we're talking about
All right.
platforms that spawn a language or that made a language very popular. It was the platform. You're really close. iOS was the platform.
Hmm.
And what language
Oh, yeah.
that people didn't like at all, but all of a sudden you had millions of apps in the App Store? What language was that? Objective
Objective
C.
C,
Yep, that's a prime
right?
example that supports my argument that
Yeah,
if you have
that's
a platform that has a significant influence in the software industry, you're going to get adoption. But
mhm.
it has to be a significant
That,
platform. WordPress, iOS, um, I'm sure there's other examples. Facebook was Facebook PHP for the most part.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh, so yeah, I mean,
yeah, yeah. Facebook. I heard Facebook have rewritten most of their internals in a different language. I think that's Java also. They have this. should I say, new language they call Hack written on top of PHP. But yeah, I think the truth is PHP it was it was cool for the hacker mentality of the day. But right now, if you're doing
Well,
anything substantial with it, like
it's cool for cheap developers in third world countries. Like it is. Like if you want cheap
fair enough.
developers, then yeah, you look for PHP, MySQL. What's the stack? PHP, MySQL, and what? Just
Mm.
HTML?
PHP, yeah, no, it was Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP.
Apache.
PHP was the last.
Is MySQL still
Um,
a thing?
yeah,
It is.
no, it's pretty much dead now.
Okay.
So the reason why it's dead is actually because of another demon in the industry called Oracle. So bought uh, Oracle bought MySQL, and most of the open source developers got pissed and created a different database called, I think, is it Julia? No, it's not Julia. It has a very nice name like that, like the name of a lady or something. Yeah. What was it called? Let me see. MySQL alternative. MariaDB. There we go. It's called MariaDB.
Yeah, I'm not familiar.
So yeah, I used to be a PHP developer. Like I used to be a hardcore PHP developer.
Yeah, I could never really get into web. I tried a couple times, but I'm just not wired for that stuff. I don't like HTML. I think JavaScript is stupid. Yeah.
Really?
I'll try again with Bolero. If and when I'm able to finish my projects, my passion project,
Yeah.
I'll look at
Mhm.
Blazor or Bolero. But this project is going to take me forever to
Yeah.
finish because it's like 3 different components to it, or 3 different stages. Anyways,
Fair enough. Fair enough.
you
Yeah, like if you ask me, I think yeah. So I was saying, if you ask me, I would prefer you look at Fable. Yes, I know it's JavaScript and all that, but really, it's from a high level. It's just pure F sharp. So Fable and Elmish, you're not really writing JavaScript per se. You're just writing F sharp, and it has good performance and stuff like that. You know, at my place of work,
I
we use
haven't
Fable, Elmish, and
I haven't seen that dude or heard from
yeah.
him in a while. Is he still alive? The Fable author? I haven't seen him on Twitter.
Oh, yeah. What's his name again? The guy with the long hair, right?
Yeah, he lives in Spain. I thought. I haven't heard from him in a while.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I haven't heard from him either. I don't think I've seen him as well. Yeah, you're right. It's been a while. Is it English Enrique? No, I don't think that's his name. I don't remember. But
Uh,
I know
Fable.
there's another guy who is current. There are two guys now who are currently like maintaining the whole Fable, and they're really doing an excellent job on it. Alfonso Garcia Caro.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay, yeah, Alfonso Garcia Caro. That's his name.
When was the last time he
So
left a
yeah,
tweet?
that was
'Cause
probably 2019. Okay, now in terms of tweets, let's see.
I'm looking at his GitHub to see if the last time he did a check-in.
Yeah, 2009. I think that was the last time he tweeted.
He
2019, sorry.
he made an update 6 days ago. to
Where in
Fable Conf, Fable
GitHub?
Conference 2019, Elmish Beyond Basics. Does he have a flower in his ear? Hold up. All right, that's suspect. But yeah, I guess he tapped out of
Nice.
social media.
No, the truth is you can get actually burnt out, right, from open source development and social media and all that. So yeah, totally respect his decision. It's not easy.
Okay, I'm confused. It said 6 days ago, but I don't see anything on here. Everything else says 9 months ago. Anyway, I guess he wants to be private.
Yeah, yeah,
Did you see
which is
my
which is fine if you ask me.
Did you see my tweet about my unpopular opinion? Writing blogs or giving talks on how to do functional programming using an object-oriented language is misguided, counterproductive, and, in my
Yeah.
opinion, disrespectful to FP communities.
You know what? Maybe we should let's dissect that opinion because I agree with you if and only if, like, I agree with the sentiment, but I'm not exactly sure whether we actually agree on the exact same thing. I'm not exactly sure whether our definition is the same. So go ahead, lay the case for that tweet. Let's see.
You want me to elaborate on what I meant by that?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So yesterday morning, because I talked about this during my masterminds too, yesterday. But yesterday morning, I had
Mhm.
Googled F sharp podcasts, and then I put in within the last 30 days because that's what I do. I look for podcasts that are very recent on
Mhm.
F sharp, and there was a .NET Core
Okay.
podcast or something like that, and it had this guy talking about doing functional programming in C sharp. I'm like, okay. And after like 2 minutes of listening to it, I just got pissed off. And so this is my issue. I This is my issue, and I kind of explained it in the thread that people replied to. Is
Mhm.
I think you're doing a disservice when you are encouraging people to declare themselves functional programmers and they don't know a functional programming language, because this is what's going to happen. All right,
Mm.
in C sharp, in Java, in Ruby, in JavaScript. And honestly, I can only speak for C sharp, but Java's so close that I'll say I'm speaking for Java too. I don't know that much about dynamic
Mhm.
languages, but this is what's going to happen.
Okay.
They're going to say, "Oh, well, what's functional programming anyway?" And one person will say, "Oh, it's programming with functions." Wrong, right? Functional programming is high order functions, right? Where you literally can pass in
Mhm.
functions into functions without any ceremony, right? Immutability,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Currying, and I'm sure that there's some other principles or properties as well. When you attempt to use a functional programming paradigm in C sharp with emphasis on functions as first class citizens, meaning that you can pass them into other methods, right? Oh
Mhm.
yeah, and you want things to be immutable, and oh yeah, you don't entertain all reference exceptions, and yes, the latest version of C sharp helps to address that. You're going to be writing twice as much code in C sharp than you will in F sharp. And the consequences of you being a functional C sharp programmer is you're writing way more code that, because of the surface area that that code has, is going to potentially expose a higher probability of bugs. And also, because you're writing so much code for immutable values and well, you will never ever have high order functions. Oh, that's not true. You have actions and you have functs and you have delegates. Yeah, the thing is you don't write normal syntax to accomplish that. You don't. You write the ceremony in order to accomplish that, which means that your code isn't as legible. People literally have to decode your code. They have to decipher your code because you wrote it in the FP style, and you're doing it in a language that has no constraints, and the compiler is not going to force you to do the right thing. And that was my conclusion. You can't say that you're a functional programmer in Java or C Sharp, and I would even say Ruby, if your compiler doesn't enforce that. And all you're doing is you're teaching people how to write messy code that's hard to understand, because not only you're writing the code for it to work and solve a problem, but you're writing a code for other people so that they can extend it. And you're doing a disservice because that language is fighting you. It's fighting you. It doesn't want to do it. So stop trying to tell people that they could be functional programmers in a language that the compiler doesn't want them to be functional. That's it.
You are 100% on point. And in fact, I have an anecdotal story to share. So I have a very good friend of mine. This guy is brilliant. When I say brilliant, I mean like he's probably one of the best like software engineers I know in terms of just the ability to uh, solve problems. You know what I mean? I'm the kind of person who has very high aesthetic values, right? So if I solve a problem, but if that problem, if my solution is messy in quotes, right? If my solution isn't simple in my mind, right? I'm not comfortable with that solution. I look for how can I simplify it? How can I make it simpler and easier to understand, right? Um, Unfortunately for my very good friend, right, that switch has been switched off in his brain. So he's like a train when he wants to solve a problem, whatever tool he can use to solve that problem, he will use it and he will keep going, right? He won't like stop and be like, can I, make this thing a little bit, I don't know. But he's brilliant engineer. So you have to understand that before I found out about functional programming and functional languages, right, I saw all these things coming into C Sharp. So we were both C Sharp developers. In fact, we both worked in the same company. So it was a situation where we would see that, oh, you could have a link. So we use link. Oh, you could pass action and func. So we use such tools. In other words, whatever the language permits is fair game. Okay. Now, my very good friend, right? So we got to a point where we kept learning, we kept improving on our skills, we kept learning, we kept improving on our skills. But I, on the other hand, got to a point and stopped, right? Got to a point where it was like, okay, I understand the depths of this language, but I try not to just use techniques or tools unless I could use it in a way that, because for me, a program is like a novel. The person who is reading it should have some kind of enjoyment. There should be some kind of flow, right? Some kind of it's like a poem, if you will. A poem is more analogous to a program, where each phrase, each line should have something that it's doing. It should. I don't know if it makes any sense. That's my own aesthetics. There's nothing wrong or right about it, but yeah, that's just how I yeah.
People should write code so that other people limit the amount of times they say "what the fuck," right? It's the WTF factor, right? You should write code to reduce the number of times someone says WTF, and that's it. Like I've literally like pulled
Mm,
myself off of projects because I looked at the code base, and within 1 hour I said what the F about 6 times. And you could basically like hold a recorder next to someone's like keyboard and gauge how good that code is or what issues that code has by the number of times they say what the F.
mhm.
So That's that's how code should be written, right? Does the code that I have right here,
Yeah.
how many times would someone say what the F? And if you say once,
Mm.
that's too many. All right. That's the way I look at it. Cause
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
curse at my screen when I look at it.
Yeah.
And you know the next thing I do? Who wrote this?
Mm.
I'll go into version history. And then I automatically, without telling anybody, I don't like that person. I automatically think that person is inferior and that they don't know what they're doing.
Mm.
But I'll never tell anybody. I'll just be upset at them because of the code that they wrote. So I did it a couple
I
weeks ago.
see.
Anyway,
Oh,
I'm
really?
listening. Uh,
Anyways, yeah. So as I was saying, so he, on the other hand, right, he essentially just writes code, and it got to a point where he was essentially doing functional programming in C sharp, and that upset everybody in the team. That upset everybody who wants to look at his code because, like you said, his code was now a lot more like verbose, if you will. So imagine someone who is trying to who wants to solve a problem in C sharp and is manually writing a discriminated union. You can imagine having to write an abstract base class, writing the current implementations, adding constructors to each of them, you know, overriding equals to overriding get hash code and all of that stuff, right? Which to me, right, from a pure language standpoint, is perfectly valid. It's okay, it's cool. But to people who aren't really well versed in the language, right, it all looked like gibberish to them. So it's one of the reasons why when I moved to F sharp and I saw how elegant and how simple things were, because you're moving to a paradigm where functional programming is expected. Functional programming is the norm. In fact, writing mutable code is when you'll be fighting with the compiler. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So those it wasn't until I moved to F sharp and I saw that I started encouraging that, dude, you need to learn F sharp. You need to move to F sharp. He hasn't really made that switch yet, but it's one of those things. It alludes to what you're saying, which is that telling regular .NET developers to write code functionally, it's actually it can actually cause more harm than good, right? Because on one hand, there is definitely advantages to writing functional code, irrespective of whether you're doing this in OOP or in C sharp. Writing code that doesn't have side effects, for example, has very good benefits in both languages. However, the mere fact that you're dealing with mutable data structures just means that A, like you said, you write double the amount of code. B, the code will even perform worse because there are no compiler optimizations to do things like, oh, okay, if we're copying, let's copy in a way that is efficient, right? So, for example, F sharp lists are like that, where if you mutate an F sharp list, you get a new list, but that new list isn't copying all the elements of the code list. There's some pointer magic that they're using behind the scenes to make sure that it's still efficient. But if you are writing C sharp and you are copying arrays all the time, it's like, trust me, your performance is going to go down the drain very quickly. So, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. But at the same time, as a counter, I always like to play devil's advocate, is functional programming is like a different planet from object-oriented programming, right? Fundamentally speaking, those two couldn't be any alike, right? So, for example, a discriminated union and currying, those concepts have no analogy in OOP. They have no use in OOP. They're totally just, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't serve any purpose,
It doesn't
right?
translate.
In OOP, it doesn't translate at all, right? And someone who is writing OOP can never understand it unless they move to the functional paradigm. Because when you see partial application, you now see the pipe forward operator, it kind of clicks that these two things are where things we've never seen before in C sharp, but in a way they kind of fit very well in a functional language. So the analogy I would give is that if the functional paradigm is like a house where gravity is upside down, right? So if because gravity is this way, right, everything we do is actually influenced by the fact that gravity is pointing downward. We don't realize it, but even the way our mouse, our keyboard, the screen, everything is based on the fact that gravity is pointing down. And the moment you flip gravity upside down, right, you need a brand new construct for holding your monitor. You need a brand new construct for virtually everything. And sometimes it makes that switch from someone who's doing OOP to someone who is doing functional, and it makes that switch very, very difficult. Sometimes that switch alone can be very, very tasking mentally, because it's like you're totally lost. You're like at ground zero. You don't even know where to start from. You don't even know what tools you should look out for and stuff like that. So bringing functional concepts, you see where I'm going, right? So long story short, is bringing functional concepts to C sharp helps that translation, helps
No,
that
no, it
movement.
doesn't.
If you ask
It doesn't. And the reason why is this. In addition to what I already explained earlier,
me. Mm-hmm.
you're not taking into consideration the fact that there's so many people entering the software development space. They're learning bad habits, and they're going to be repeating those habits, and then they're going to be teaching those habits. A lot of stuff that we do is doctrine, right? We don't even question it. It's like
Yeah,
religion. We just do it
yeah,
just because that's the way
yeah,
it's been done. The reason why so
yeah.
many and maybe you can relate. I'll be surprised if you can't. The reason why so many of the solutions that you work on and that I work on, that you and I didn't create initially, are one library, is because the framework gives you one library with a whole bunch of folders to put your views, your controllers, and your services in. And so everybody has a monolith. No one ever
Mm,
questioned it. No one.
yeah.
Right? And so
Hmm.
the reason why I say that is because if you have people that are preaching functional programming in Java, functional programming in C sharp, and they're writing this horrendous code just to say that they're functional, then these people that are coming from code camps, people that are coming from very few people that are coming from a bachelor of computer science degree, the first thing they're going to do is, oh, this
Mm,
person is smart. Obviously, they know what they're doing, and they're copying code that just wasn't
mm.
intended, and they're going to be disseminating it. Now they're writing now they're doing podcasts, now they're doing blog posts, now they're doing conference talks. I'll never forget last year I was listening to a YouTube conference talk on what is it? Google I/O has their own. Is it called Google I/O?
Yeah, yeah,
I was
exactly.
okay. I think it was a Google I/O conference talk, and this dude gave a talk on uh, how to write code in JavaScript that is less error prone. And he was talking about null reference exceptions. He was talking about multi-threading or concurrency issues. And I was
Mhm.
listening to his talk, and it fits into the example that I'm talking about right now. You have somebody that is teaching. This dude is on a platform teaching an audience of new developers, more than likely, but also some seasoned
Mhm.
developers, of how to take a language that wasn't meant to deliver high quality maintainable code, and how to bloat the syntax into doing what you want, just to
Mm.
reduce errors that another language coupled with this compiler would never let you do. So I left a comment in there. I'm like, yeah, you can use JavaScript, and you can write this code this type of way to basically resolve all these different types of runs. I always say runtime exceptions when the exception is automatically runtime. You can do all that, or you could
Yeah.
just use Haskell, or you could just use F sharp, or you could just use Elm,
Mm.
and then you have to deal with this.
Mm.
So, to make in
Yeah.
conclusion, when people are teaching functional programming in Java, functional programming in C sharp, they're teaching people. They're doing a disservice because they're teaching people how to write more funky code, and for those people to not only start doing it, but for them to promote it to others. And it's just wrong. It's
Yeah.
flawed. So
Yeah. I told you a long time ago that we are. I think it was Bob Robert Martin was saying that means software engineering is essentially the number of software engineers doubles every 5 years, which means that the majority of software engineers have less than 5 years of experience by definition. And that also means that stupid traditions tend to spread very quickly, and we tend to go in cycles, right? So somebody comes up with a stupid idea, everybody believes it's gospel, everybody implements that stupid idea. Then down the line, someone else comes up, or we all realize that this is stupid, and we move away from it. And then the cycle repeats. Down the line, someone else comes in, reintroduces the same stupid idea, and we're just going in circles, right? So it's one of those things where, like you said, uh, some they just say, "Oh, write functional programs in C sharp, right? Write functional programs in JavaScript and all of that." And then down the line, everybody just assumes, "Oh yeah, this is the way to do it," and they start writing all the bloated code and all that, only for maybe someone to just wake up and say, "No, this is stupid," and no. I lost my train of thought. I think my right train of thought was that once it gets there, once someone who is less than 5 years of experience goes to a conference talk and essentially divulges the exact same thing, before you know what's happening, the majority of the industry is doing it that way. And you will now sound like a crazy person telling people, no, this isn't how to do it. Because it's like whoever you're telling that, it's like, so you know more than what half of the you know more than half of all the software engineers, right? So it's like they see you as being arrogant, whereas in reality, it's like because you've you have been you're one cycle ahead. You can clearly see all the downsides, all the drawbacks with going that approach. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
does
remember
that make
once.
sense?
Yeah, yeah. I remember I was working at a telecommunications spot, and the the smart people got together and they were trying to design the next feature. And this has to do with like cell phones and government surveillance.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
the way that they designed was exactly what you were explaining, because object oriented programming is based on modeling real world objects. And so they literally were saying, all right, well, this Figmajig has a component called whatever, and that component has these behaviors. And so they were literally, based on what the textbooks taught everybody for object oriented programming, they literally were taking nouns and establishing
Oh,
properties and behaviors of those nouns. And exactly
oh
what
my
you said,
god.
when I jumped in and said we probably shouldn't be modeling based on real world everything that this thing has, but instead we can model based on the rules that they need to comply with instead of the actual literal nouns and behaviors. Like we're not modeling the real world, we're modeling the rules that this particular system needs to comply with. Focuses on rules, not everything that they do. And they looked at me like I was the most arrogant mother effer alive. Like, and so it's exactly
I
what you
can
said.
imagine.
It's like
Mm,
everybody looked at me
I,
like I was crazy, and I'm looking
mm,
at them like
I have
I'm listening.
I have a similar story. So, although this was a little bit earlier in my career, right? So then I was still like a junior developer, and most of the senior developers all came together. And we were specking out a system, and then um, I think that was like the head developer wrote code in a particular way. He essentially did what you're saying, model each object, and then give have different methods that essentially instantiate and color that objects and stuff like that. And in fact, he even read it in a textbook. So it's like he had all the authority in the world. And he was telling me this is rich domain models, When you're developing a system, your object should be rich in the sense that your object should have all the functionality that each object is supposed to do. And I'm like, that is crazy. It's crazy. Like imagine you had a Scott object And then everything Scott wanted to do was a method call on Scott. Even if Scott wanted to update the database, yeah, even if Scott wanted to update the database, that implementation would be inside the Scott object and stuff like that. And I told him because, okay, thankfully it wasn't just me. We were two, me and that my other friend I told you that writes a lot of code. So the two of us were like, no, that doesn't make sense. That it's going to be very difficult to debug and all that. And instead, what we should do is have, like you said, rules. Essentially, we have like uh, interfaces, all right? We had classes that held all the different use cases and interactions that you'd want to do. Then we use interfaces to plug everything together. And there was a serious pushback. In fact, the pushback was that we were advocating anemic domain models,
Yeah.
and anemic design is actually an anti-pattern, and we should move away from anemic. Ah. So, and I remember when we pushed back, it's like, no, you don't know more than the guys who wrote the textbooks on it. Like the guys who wrote the textbooks, they know what they're doing, and they say rich domain models is the way to go and everything. And yeah, suffice to say, we did the project his way, and it did not end well. It ended horribly because we had like huge blocks of code that was just unmaintainable. We had method calls that were just happening from all kinds of places. It was a nightmare. So yeah, and
Did you guys
it's
have a
one of these things that
retrospective? Did you guys have a retrospective at the end of it?
not really. We didn't
Yeah.
really. No, yeah, we didn't really have retrospectives, partly because at the time, right, the project we were working on was like this massive government funded project. So the deadlines were already messed up. And in fact, to make it even more interesting, we were working directly in the customer's office. So that would be like carrying the developers, going to the server room of the wherever the project was going to take place, and just planting the developers there. And there was no QA process, there was no like triaging, there was no bug issues, blah blah blah. It was, we need XYZ, start coding. So we were essentially coding monkeys, you know. That's pretty much it. So yeah, yeah, I totally relate. But I remember it because what made me remember when you were saying it was because of the fact that it was written in a book. He read it from the book, and
Hmm.
he was now telling us that you guys don't know more than the guys that wrote the book.
But honestly, I'm guilty of that too. Like,
Really?
well, there's times where, just like if you were writing an essay in college, um, it's not enough for you to make a blanket statement. Sometimes
Mm,
you need to provide the book, the chapter, the page number, right? So that you can say, hey,
mm,
this has been backed up by a published author that is a domain expert, right? So I'm guilty of that, because I know that my word's not enough, and that people want, in order to really solidify your opinion or your argument about something, you have to provide them data that they're still going to ignore. If people aren't interested in the truth, then no matter what you give them, they're just going to ignore it. So
exactly, exactly. You're right. You're right. You're right. But yeah, it's just funny how it's easy for most of us in this software industry to essentially just take things we read or take things we saw somewhere and use it as gospel truth, and not even try to challenge it or um, figure out for ourselves, does this actually make sense? Looking at the data, like you said, sometimes data could come in multiple forms, like looking at the data of how many bugs are we having, how many issues are we having, which approach is giving us less problems, which approaches do we have the largest amount of turnaround time. In other words, how quickly can we ship features? Because like you said earlier, at the end of the day, it's all about shipping value, right? So if you if whatever technique, if whatever approach you're doing isn't bringing, isn't helping you ship value, then what are you doing?
Yeah.
Eventually we won. Yeah, eventually we won the debate with about the whole anemic and domain model designs. And do you know how we won it? We won it when we asked the senior engineer to write tests for his application. I think there was like a rule or something where we were supposed to write tests, and it
Mm.
became very clear very quickly that this whole anemic, sorry, this rich domain models is just bullshit because writing tests for static methods or writing tests for, yeah, static methods is just it. Like, do I need to say more? Once your method is static, it's like you've baked the implementation, and at that point you can't test it. So
Hold up,
yeah.
hold up. Say that again. You said static method writing tests for static methods is what?
Yeah, writing tests for static methods is pretty much impossible.
Why?
Hold on. Let me explain. I'm not talking about the static method itself. I'm talking about a method that calls a static method, right? You can't, if it was like an interface or something, you can swap out. I'm talking about OOP now. I'm not talking about from a functional
You're not talking
language
about
perspective.
procedural. Okay.
Yeah, I'm talking about procedural, right?
My
So
static methods
if
are usually pure functions in C sharp.
exactly, yeah,
Or if they're not pure, they don't have any state. Um,
yeah, but okay, so let's say, for example, okay, exactly, because they are pure, they don't have any state, so you're fine, right? In other words, your static functions aren't doing anything that, how do I put it? They're not like writing to the disk or calling out to a database. They're not doing anything that's impure, so you're fine. But imagine you had a static method that is used to talk to your database or talk to the file system, and you have methods that call that static method directly. You're stopped. You're stuck automatically because now when you want to run unit tests for that particular method, that's the method that's calling the static method. You can't because it must talk to the database or whatever the case may be.
I think
You
it's
know?
how you model it because, like, here's the thing. Okay, maybe we got to put some constraints on what we're talking about so we can zero in on why we're in disagreement. Uh,
Okay.
so when I'm writing C sharp code,
Mm-hmm.
it's mutually exclusive. My classes are either Poco, Poco
Mm-hmm.
objects, meaning that
Mm-hmm.
they're only data. There's no behaviors, right? That's one type of class,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mm-hmm.
the other type of class is there's only operations. There's no state, and it's just like
Okay.
F sharp. So when I'm writing C sharp, I either have
Mm-hmm.
structures or I have operations that I'm passing those structures into. And just
Okay.
like in F sharp, a module is really a static class. I kind of do the same thing in C
Mm-hmm.
sharp, where I just have static I have a static class that has static methods, no properties,
Mm-hmm.
no member variables. Can't be a member
Mm-hmm.
variable. Well, it could, but you have to declare a static. And I don't have any issues, and everything's testable. Things aren't testable, or things become more challenging to test, is when you have static classes that have static members in them. That's where you start running into issues where you have to force a teardown so that your other
Mm.
tests aren't affected because there's still state that exists that never has been cleaned up. Are you with me, or
Okay.
are we
So
talking about two different ways of implementing?
yeah, we're talking
Okay,
yeah, we're talking about two completely different things. So
okay.
in your own so here's the difference between what we are saying, right? In your own case, you have static methods that have no state. In other words, your static methods only have input and output. And when you want to test your static method, you only supply parameters, which are the inputs, and you check the result, which is the output, which makes writing tests at your end easy. Isn't that correct? Right?
Okay.
Good. Now, I'm talking about, so in your own case, for example, if you wanted to talk to the database, you would have a special function called write to database, right? And that database, write to database, it has a particular signature, okay? And then when you want to test that your app writes to the database, you would replace the entire function of write to DB and pass it into the operation that's supposed to do some kind of calculations and write that calculation to the DB. Isn't that correct? So there is no hidden implementation in your functions because your functions are just taking input and spitting out output. And those input will be other functions as well. Is that correct? Or the result of other functions as well.
Yeah, I think we're talking about two different things. It sounds like what you were just saying
So
is you're passing in a method to a function in which the implementation details of that method is doing side effects, and that's where your testing can
yes,
have issues.
yes,
Okay.
yes. So
Yeah.
what I'm talking about is the classic C sharp way of doing it, where you would have a class which creates an object, and that object will hold a reference to something that writes to a file, right? So typically, the way we do it is we have an instance variable, we can call it DB service or whatever the case may be, and then whenever we want to write to the database from that particular function, we would use what was injected into the class and call whatever interface to do whatever work we want to do. Now, what I'm saying is, before then, no, I'm just saying
I'm,
that's
I'm,
the
I'm
C sharp way
listening.
of doing it.
Okay, I'm listening
Mm.
because I'm listening.
Yeah.
Because I don't
Yeah,
do that. I used to do that, but I don't do that anymore.
yeah. I totally respect that. But here's what I'm saying makes the code untestable. If you use that pattern of having hidden state, like you mentioned, having static properties, right? If you have hidden state, and that hidden state is a static call, it's a static method. Sorry, if your function calls a static method that contains side effects in any way, shape, or form, you can't isolate the side effect function from the function that called it. Those two are baked together.
Yeah.
So typically we use interfaces to separate them. So you would essentially use the first method would call the second method using an interface. That way, when you want to test, you could use a mock and swap the mock and all that. What's his name? I can't remember this guy. This guy that likes unit testing a lot. He I think he has a talk on it. The difference between mocks and stubs. So what I'm talking about is mocking. What you are talking about is stubs.
Okay.
Do you get? So in a stub, right? You are replacing the entire functionality, and you're just putting a dummy functionality, just replacing the raw functionality itself, right, with the dummy version or whatever the case may be, or you're just checking it out. That one is besides the point. But in a mock, you are essentially substituting. You're substituting the uh, uh, um the dependency. But more importantly is that your test has expectations on how that mock should behave or how that mock should be interacted with. Whereas with a stub, your test doesn't care how it interacts with the stub. I think I'm going on a tangent, but the long story short is that in C sharp, when you're writing regular C sharp and you have static methods everywhere and your code is calling static methods, it's like you baked that implementation into the function and you can't replace it. So even if you call it inside it, even if you call that method in a test project, it will still call the production static method. Does that make sense?
It does. For whatever reason, I'm thinking about, is it analogous to a computation expression, and or computation expression is testable because you bake in a whole bunch of conditional IO operations into one method and you pass it along as if it's just an individual token. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I think I understand what you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah.
Is like back in the day,
Mhm.
I used to how's this work? I would pass in an interface as an argument to another method's parameter, and that interface would ultimately execute some logic that could be touching a database or a web server. And
Mhm. Mm-hmm.
once you're doing that, I I, I would agree that you're having a harder time decoupling uh, pure functions from side effects. So ever since I read Scott Vlashin's book, I don't do that anymore. And so
Mm.
my all my IO calls are literally coming from my view model or my controller, and it'll get the result, checks if that soda is successful or not successful, and then it'll do something else that's IO. And so, like, I don't
Mm.
translate it. I don't bake IO operations into business logic. Um,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
domain logic.
yeah.
All that stuff is in my controller or in my view model that handles IO calls, and
Mm.
that's it. So
That's it.
actually, I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
elaborate on
That
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 more.
that, that makes sense. Nah, I totally get what you mean. I totally get what you mean. Yeah.
Uh, Anyways,
So what time is it over there? Here it's getting late already. It's almost 7 o'clock,
it's 5 minutes to
7
two.
p.m.
5 minutes to 2 p.m.
All right, it's too early for you guys. So mhm.
Yeah, I'm starting to tap out. I try to get
Yeah.
outside, but it's been real. It's been an interesting conversation. Do you know what? Before I hop off, I don't know how to say this person's name. Gurmoit Singh. He kept on saying the expression problem, and I Wikipedia it, and he said that that's what we're talking about. The expression problem is a term used in
Uh,
discussing strengths and weaknesses of various programming paradigms and programming languages. The expression problem
I
is a new
see.
name for an old problem. The goal is to define a data type by cases, where one can add new cases to the data type and new functions over the data type without recompiling existing code and while retaining static
Mm.
type safety. Well, that sounds like the open close rule.
Yeah,
Open
the
close
goal
rule.
is to define data. Yeah, yeah, I know the open close principle without recompiling the existing code and retaining static type safety. All right, yeah, yeah. It sounds a lot like the open close principle. Oops. Did I just log off? Am I still on?
Sorry. You there?
Yeah, it's like you accidentally closed the window or
I
something.
accidentally closed the window. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. Yeah, I was looking at the. Yeah, you're right. It actually sounds a lot like. It actually sounds a lot like open close principle. Yeah, yeah. Expression problem. Interesting.
My brain hurts. It's a healthy conversation.
Yeah, yeah. It's been good. It's been real.
Um, I was gonna say before I hop off, how do I close this thing? You transitioned from your, my brain's starting to hurt now. You were transitioning from your video streamer. What you had one
Mm.
project, and I think you just transitioned off of it for something else. I forgot what the status was.
Yeah. So the project was there was a music streaming app I wanted to do. Essentially Plex. I don't know if you've heard of Plex before. Do you know what Plex is?
Sounds like I thought that was Microsoft's Visual Studio testing thing.
Nah, nah, nah.
Okay.
So there is a tool, a platform called Plex that essentially allows you to have your own Netflix. So you point it at your own like storage hard disk. You also run it on your PC or something like that, and then other devices can connect to your PC and you can watch movies off it just the same way you're watching Netflix. The only difference is that you have full control over the movies that you want to watch and stuff like that, right? So what I'm trying to build is essentially that, but for music streaming. So it would be the equivalent of say having Plex, but for your own music. So if you have songs you create, songs you write that you don't want to post on Spotify or something, and or you have a huge vast library of MP3s and stuff like that that isn't on Spotify, and you can host it on the platform I'm trying to build, and then you'll be able to have different apps that can stream from it directly, stream from it and even have some kind of offline caching mechanism. So
What
instead of
was
streaming the music, right? Yeah.
what was Windows Media Center?
Um,
Was that completely unrelated?
Windows Media, it's related. So Windows Media Center is more like Plex actually, and it's less like what I'm talking about, but it's more like Plex. So Windows Media Center was essentially something you would install on a PC, and then other devices could stream content from it. So yeah, that's what I was kind of working on, and I got stuck. I got stuck somewhere with the single sign-on and the mostly the data access, because the data access story in F sharp, in my opinion, isn't really good. I really don't find it uplifting. So I figured rather than bitch about it, it's better I start working on something. Something I know that I can solve it and solve it in a way that I would be happy with. And then I can just make it open. It will be open source. Everybody will have access to it, and let's see how it goes from there. I really like the philosophy of Giraffe. So Giraffe is the F sharp um, web framework that sits on top of ASP.NET. So
Yeah.
instead of having uh, controllers and all those other stuff,
Dustin
yeah,
Morris, right? That's his name.
yeah, Dustin
He's
Morris, yeah.
very
So
opinionated. He's borderline extremist. He's worse than me. I like following his tweets.
yeah,
He doesn't hold back, but he's very opinionated.
yeah. So I really like his approach with Giraffe, and I'm even thinking of calling mine Antelope. Just to go into the whole theme of naming it after animals. Um, so the idea here is just the same way he built a functional layer that sits on top of ASP.NET. The one I'm trying to build is a functional layer that sits on top of Entity Framework Core. So if I'm able to write some, because my plan is to use a type provider to do it, a layer that sits on top of Entity Framework that gives you um, a very nice way of talking to different data sources, gives you a very nice way of querying it using the query computation expression that comes with F sharp and all that. So that really is my goal right now. So once I solve it, which shouldn't take that long, hopefully, it shouldn't take maybe software engineers are bad at estimating, but if I'm to estimate, like, I think I should be able to come up with a prototype in like a month or two, easy. So once I have that prototype, then I can now open source it, have people contribute whatever they need to contribute, and I can now move back to the streaming app I was building, and then use whatever I've built to, you know, solve the data access problem there and move on from there. So
It sounds like
that is my plan for the next few weeks.
you program
Yeah,
at home.
yeah, it is.
I guess you don't have a choice. It's not like you could go to a cafe right now during the pandemic. I think that's one of the biggest things that brought me back because I'm so used to going to like cafes and sandwich shops to do programming that it's hard for me to
Mm,
just sit at home on the weekends or on the evenings of weekdays and still hammer out an hour. Like,
mm. Yeah, that would be rough. That's probably really rough. But yeah, I personally, yeah, I work from home. Like I told you, I just got this new HD monitor, and it has really helped my productivity. Honestly, like I'm getting 2x, 3x the amount of hours that I used to put in before. Because before on my laptop, I would have to be like hunched a little bit, but now I can just relax and just be coding like this. So
that's good.
yeah, my mind is money well spent, really. So
All right, Odie. Well, I'm about to hit these streets, but it's been real talking to you,
All
man.
right.
Yeah. See ya.
Yeah, you too, man. Yeah. Bye.